And for more, let's bring in Molly Hooper. She's a CBSN political contributor and congressional reporter for The Hill. Molly, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
Okay, so House Democrats, they take over Thursday. They say they have a plan to end the shutdown. Explain what they're trying to accomplish here.
Well, what they're going to do is they're going to take one package of bills that would fund 5 or 6 agencies and not the Department of Homeland Security. That would be in another bill. So they would essentially pass a set of bills that would fund the government in those agencies like Interior, State Department, those type of agencies through the year. They'll pass that and send it to the Senate.
And that's basically everything except the wall.
Everything except the wall and Department of Homeland Security, which is part of the Homeland Security bill. So you'd have most of the government reopened if the Senate agreed to it and the president signed off on it. But then again, that's a big if, because Mitch McConnell is saying he is not going to take up anything related to reopening the government until there is a bill that the president can sign, full stop. And if the president says, well, I'm going to veto these because they don't include funding for a wall, then Mitch McConnell won't bring it up. But the House on Thursday will also pass that other piece of the DHS funding that would only fund that would only fund that department at current levels through February 8th, so that it buys a little bit of time for Congress and the White House to negotiate on how to move forward concerning funding for border security, because there are Democrats in the Senate who are open to voting for money for border security, but not for a quote-unquote wall.
Well, if you say that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell won't support anything without the president's support, the House bill doesn't include funding for a wall, it appears that we're in the exact same place we were 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. It's just kind of shuffling cards around on a table and expecting to get some different result, or we're not going anywhere. And again, until we see movement between the White House and Democrats, it's unclear how this moves forward. Because keep in mind, and this is kind of an interesting side note, even though the House Democrats are in control of, Democrats are in control of the House, Republicans aren't necessarily in the House, or not necessarily going to go along with whatever the president signs off on, or more importantly, what Senate Republicans sign off on. So President Trump may maybe he's lukewarm on supporting a bill, but again, Democrats won't be able to count on Republican votes necessarily, even though it's something the president supports. Just because Republicans, they have their own constituents they have to answer to, and again, you see people like Mark Meadows, who comes out, people in the Freedom Caucus, even though they do rev up the president, at some point the president's going to have to say, listen, we got to get stuff done. And, he might not see them support these measures. So that kind of will be an interesting side note here to see which Republicans support measures that the president himself supports. Or does not veto, so to speak.
Yeah, fair enough. So Democrats take control of the House. We have, I guess, a handful of months before we all move into 2020, 24/7 mode, and maybe something can get done in Washington. What do Democrats think they might have a chance to actually legislate in 2019?
Well, I'm just going to refer to my old colleague, Chip Reed, when he says...
I was hoping you weren't listening.
I know, fingers crossed, right? Hope springs eternal. I know. No, it's unclear. I know that the Democrats and Republicans do want to work on an infrastructure bill. But again, the key issue facing those parties is how to pay for it. Democrats want the government to pay for it. Republicans want a public-private partnership, which would require, as Chip Reed said, seed money from private entities. And Democrats don't like that so much. So again, it will be a balancing act. But perhaps we could see some movement on infrastructure. And if there's a way that Republicans can actually get money for a border wall, it could be in an infrastructure package. Because as I've talked to several Republicans who wouldn't necessarily support a lot of money going, a lot of spending on money going towards infrastructure on its own, they do say they are more open to doing that if it would include funding for some kind of border wall. But again, as you said, 2020 mode's coming up, and any sort of, gifting of President Trump's campaign promise to build a big, beautiful wall, and Democrats may, pull out of that sort of deal. So it's unclear. But infrastructure is something they're focusing on. And keep in mind, we're still going to have to fund the government next year. Who knew?
It's going to be a long 2 years. But switching gears to the 2020 presidential race, big news out of Boston yesterday. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is exploring a run. She was asked yesterday if she was concerned about her electability and if her politics were too polarizing for a national race. Here's what she had to say.
I run for office because I'm grateful down to my toes for the opportunities that were given to me, and I am determined that we will give those same opportunities, not just to some of our kids, but to all of our kids. The problem we've got right now in Washington is that it works great for those who've got money to buy influence. And I'm fighting against that, and you bet it's going to make a lot of people unhappy.
Molly, a lot of people see this as a belated Christmas gift for the president. This is exactly who he wants to run against. So how does Warren go up against President Trump in a head-to-head race?
Well, see, that is, I mean, he does want to run against Elizabeth Warren, and he'd like to take her on, but keep in mind, she's going to have about 45 to 50 other opponents, and in the Democratic field, and I'm exaggerating here, it's more like 30.
But only a little.
But only a little. Yeah, just a scooch. But no, and what will be very interesting is, as reporters, when we follow the Senate, is looking at all these Democrats who are running for president, because you look at Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, possibly Amy Klobuchar, Sherrod Brown, a lot of Democrats who are more progressive and left-leaning. This poses problems in terms of getting stuff done between the White House and the Congress, because they will be running for office, right, for president, trying to push each other to the left, and you have a Republican president who wants to try to, who also has a base to appeal to. Where do people come together in the middle, and where can the deals get struck? And that is the question. But Elizabeth Warren will be seeing how she posits herself against people like Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. And I mean, just remember that 2016 the GOP presidential field. I mean, it was rough and tumble with Donald Trump in there. And, we'll see if that happens with this Democratic field.
Given that crowded field, how does Warren distinguish herself? What is her story? How is she different? How does she make the case that she's the one out of the 30?
Well, I mean, that's what they're all trying to establish right now. But, she did come up, sort of behind the financial bailout or the reformulating of the Consumer Protection Bureau. She does have a long history of being for financial protections of people. She's a progressive. And whenever I see her walking down the halls in Congress, she does have a lot of followers and backers, and just regular people who are up on Capitol Hill going from office to office, who cheer when Elizabeth Warren walks down the hall. But keep in mind, I also see that with Bernie Sanders. So really, she's going to need to position herself. She's running in a race against Bernie Sanders and trying to pick up that more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. But I mean, if you look at all the people who, and current members of Congress, who supported even Bernie Sanders, look at somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I shouldn't say current members, I should say incoming members. They will be current as of Thursday. But you see individuals like that who were on the Bernie Sanders train. What did those individuals do, and how did they, divide their alliances? And really, I think that the big battle within the Democrats, for Elizabeth Warren in particular, will be with somebody like Bernie Sanders.
It's going to be an exhausting next 2 years. But Molly Hooper, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.